Every nation strives to bring prosperity to its people, and this remains the preoccupation of successive administrations in Nigeria in tackling infrastructural development and providing for the future. In fact, nations choose options on how best to raise finance to address its challenges. Essentially, Nigeria needs not less than $100 billion annually to meet its infrastructural deficit, and this has raised options on how best to go about this. As we speak, not less than 84 countries of the world has taken to the option of sovereign wealth fund in raising finances, saving for the future, and of course, addressing its infrastructural needs. And that is why our focus today will center on Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Investment Authority and the management of the Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Fund in meeting the developmental needs of Nigerians. My guest on this program is somebody you'd like to meet in a moment. I am Cliff Ayoze, and this is On the Spot. My guest on the spot today is the Managing Director of Nigeria's Sovereign Investment Authority. He brings a wealth of global experience in the financial services sector in his role as Pioneer Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority. He joined the NSIA as Chief Executive on October 2nd, 2012, from the Switzerland's largest bank, UBS Securities, where he was Managing Director in the New York branch of its Equities Research Unit. Prior to his experience at UBS Securities, the Chief Executive of Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Investment Authority had spent 6 years at JP Morgan Securities in London from 2001 through 2006, rising from the post of Vice President to Managing Director within the Equities Division. Prior to JP Morgan, the Managing Director of Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Investment Authority was at Goldman Sachs Asset Management, London, from 1998 through 2001 as Analyst Portfolio Manager. And in this role, he was a member of the team running the Pan-European Equity Fund and Global Technology Fund. Who are we talking about? With a tall resume, he is a product of University of Port Harcourt, where he majored in chemical engineering before proceeding to Harvard Business School and obtained his Master's in Business Administration MBA in 1998. And prior to his MBA program, Mr. Uche Oji, I'd like to reveal, the Chief Executive of Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, worked at Diamond Bank, Lagos, and of course, a whole lot of other decisions. I think we'll get into that in a moment. And it's my pleasure to welcome on the spot the Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, Mr. Uche Oji. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Talking about the Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Fund, as managed by the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, from 2012, when you effectively took over, to the present day.
Sure.
We're talking about a profit of 15 billion naira, and one wonders how you made this.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. 15.8 billion naira was for the fiscal year ended December 31st, 2014. For the year ended 2013, it was much smaller. It was 525 million naira, and part of it was because we hadn't really invested much in 2013. Let me take you back step by step to how we ended 2014, and we can have some insights into 2015 if you choose. When we started in 2012, it was just myself, and we had to build a team, we had to build a business, we had to put all our policies and procedures in place. So the board and I set about hiring a team to do that. But also it took us time to actually receive the funds to manage. We didn't receive it until July 2013. And as a consequence, we started preliminary investment activities in September 2013, hence the reduced amount of profitability in 2013. But still, we made sure that we paced our costs and the setup to make sure we didn't extend more than we were actually making. So it was always a key mantra of this business to try and be profitable day one and remain so. And hopefully, we hope that this streak continues. It's difficult to say. 2014 was an interesting year because that was a demonstration year for us. It was a year to show how the fund can actually run. And the Nigeria Sovereign Wealth Fund is actually three funds. The first fund is a fund that is described as a stabilization fund. The second fund is a fund described as a future generation fund. And the third fund is a Nigeria infrastructure fund. The stabilization fund contains 20% of our assets, and the job of that fund is to try and invest in short-term liquid instruments like bonds and treasury bills, such that we can liquidate that very quickly. If the government needs money, we can provide budgetary support. That is how the law describes the function of that fund. The second fund, the Future Generations Fund, is longer term. It's longer term because we are providing savings for such a time as when the hydrocarbon resources will run out. I think I know a thing or two about hydrocarbon. I'm a chemical engineer by training. And the reality is that this is not a renewable resource. One day it will run out. And we need to prepare. And so the essence of the Future Generations Fund is to try and build a savings base through a diversified set of investments. And here we're investing in everything from bonds to public equities, to private equity, to what we describe as other diversifiers, which are kind of investments that give us a steady stream of revenue. And most of this investment is made internationally. The reality is you cannot intervene with what is inside. Most times intervene with what you have outside, and this is why most of this investment is made outside the country. And that contains 40% of our funds. And the bulk of the profit in 2014 came from those investments we made, particularly in private equity, where we saw some really good returns. The third fund is the Nigeria Infrastructure Fund. Now that is designed to provide investments for infrastructure in Nigeria. And that also contains 40% of our assets.
Okay.
And there we described our focus areas as follows. We are focused on agriculture, we're focused on healthcare, we're focused on motorways, on power, and on housing. These are the 5 areas of initial focus. Now, there are about 15 areas altogether that we can invest in, but we wanted to start with these 5. That fund has made a few investments. One of the first investments we made was in agriculture, and I'll talk about that later. Yeah. But the second strategy of that fund is also to seed and create institutions that will help the development of the infrastructure sector. So for housing, one of the institutions that we helped invest in and seed is the mortgage refinancing company, which should help bring down the cost of mortgages. We're now in the process of developing something else called the Nigeria Credit Enhancement Facility, which actually provides a platform that makes it easy for pension funds and perhaps insurance companies who want to invest in infrastructure to invest with what we describe as credit enhancement. The third institution we're helping drive is the Development Bank of Nigeria. There's an interim CEO there now, Dr. Shehu Yahaya, who's driving that business with obviously the support of the NSIA. Those will help bring access to small and medium-scale enterprises, to lower cost of capital, in my opinion, that will help drive overall development in the country. So these are some of the things the NSIA is doing.
Well, the Sovereign Wealth Fund has continued to be an issue,
Yes.
among the different strata of government,
Yes.
federal, state, and the local government, which ought to own it, or I would say owns that.
Sure.
Why has it been so controversial since this works in other countries?
Yes.
At least 84 countries are said to have keyed into the sovereign wealth approach, to raising funds, saving, and all that.
Sure.
What do you think are the issues from the time the act supporting or empowering the setting up of the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority was passed by the National Assembly and assented to on 26 May 2011? Why is there all this controversy in investing in it?
Yes, that's a very good question. I honestly didn't even know that there was all this controversy before I took the job, to be honest. Okay. I was in New York running a global team, and when I arrived and I heard all the issues, I understand part of the issues, but I also will say this. it is not unusual that we have controversy. It's not unusual. It's a healthy debate, in my opinion, and some other countries have had their own controversies. The truth is this: most times, some of these things end up work when people show and demonstrate that it can work. That is the first and foremost way to sort out some of the controversies. There is first of all, let me correct one impression. The Sovereign Wealth Fund is not being sued.
Yeah.
There is a lawsuit between state governments and the federal government on the use of proceeds in the excess crude account, or even the excess crude account in itself. That is not the lawsuit I'm part of, or the NSIA is part of, and I can't even discuss it because it will be sub judice. But the NSIA in itself is not being sued. Now, obviously, money is involved. With money being involved, being managed by somebody else, there are trust issues. And my opinion with trust issues, the only way to solve it is to demonstrate that A, you're accountable, you're transparent, and you have processes that make for good governance. And this was part of why, even when we received the money in July, we didn't rush straight to start investing. We had to put all these processes and all these governance factors in place first.
I know already you will say yes to my next question. What are the things you look at for, and you say investing in sovereign wealth fund is the right thing to do by any country?
So there are three things I look out for. Number one is obviously and most of these things you see it in hindsight. Today we have had a global decline in oil price. Every sovereign wealth fund I know that is funded from oil is now drawing from their sovereign wealth fund.
Okay.
I think it was in the paper recently, Norwegians for the first time drew some money from a sovereign wealth fund, a tiny amount. I don't know the number, but something like $3 billion or $4 billion, compared to $900 and something billion in the sovereign wealth fund. And don't forget, to build this thing in less than 25 years. Okay, so a lot of respect has to be given to these people. What I see is the consistency and the support of government to continue to contribute in those sovereign wealth funds, because in hindsight, it will save you the day you need the money. Can you imagine if Nigeria had done this thing since 1976 when Abu Dhabi started, and we put $500 million a year into it? Today we'll have significant amounts of money that we can use to solve serious problems.
Okay, if you're just joining us, this is On the Spot, focusing on Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Fund and Nigeria's economic development. We'll be back in a moment to look at other sides of the management of the Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Fund by the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority in a moment. On the Spot.
This is NTA News 24.
If you're just joining us, this is On the Spot, focusing on Nigeria's Sovereign Wealth Fund and economic development in Nigeria, with the Managing Director of the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, Mr. Uche Orji, as our guest. We've laid the foundation for this discussion, and we're talking about the core investment you've done over time to the benefit of Nigerians.
Sure.
Because you talked about the three components, of the Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Fund, as the case may be. What are the areas of interest in terms of investment nationally?
Sure. So I mentioned the first 5 areas of focus. But by the way, when we started, there were 4 criteria that we used to determine what areas would be of interest to us. The first is a sector of national interest. Will it make a national impact? 2, can we attract foreign direct investors to partner with us? Because we also want to use this as a platform to bring capital into the country. 3rd, can we create attractive commercial and social returns? And don't forget, this is not a grant scheme. It's not a social infrastructure fund. It is an infrastructure fund designed to earn and make money while solving both by creating commercial value and also creating social value. So, and the 4th is, are the legal and regulatory environments conducive for us to invest? So first, national impact. 2, can we attract other investors? 3, can we create attractive commercial and social returns? 4, are the legal and regulatory environments conducive? We set this as the 4 key factors that will determine how we invest.
So to what extent has this impacted on your operations?
Absolutely, it has. There are some sectors we would like to invest in, and it doesn't quite work in all these 4 areas, and we walk away from them. There are areas, and I can go into that later on, but there are sectors that are imperative today in the country, for example. Let's take transmission, for example. But the regulatory environment hasn't quite made it easy for people like us to invest. We're looking at that, and I'm sure that is being addressed very quickly. So there are certain things, in my opinion, that will end up determining how we invest. So after we did that, we came out with 15 sectors that were investable, that we can call infrastructure sectors. We now said to ourselves, hang on a minute, we don't have enough money to address all 15. You spread yourself thin, you end up with what is described as tokenism. A little bit here, a little bit there, you solve no problem.
Okay.
So we had to focus. So we narrowed down to 5. Agriculture, healthcare, housing, motorways, power. We have made investment. First investment we made was in agriculture. We had to decide, how do we invest in agriculture? There are 2 ways to invest in agriculture. One is you can invest in a fund that is a specialist in agriculture, so that the specialists can actually handle it, because we don't understand crop risk, we don't understand animal risk, we don't understand some of those things. So one of the things we chose to do was to invest through a fund that is a specialist in agriculture. So the first investment we made was in a fund called FAFIN, Fund for Agriculture Finance in Nigeria, run by professionals. We invested alongside KfW, Bank in Germany, and we invested alongside the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. One of their key flagship investments is actually a dairy farm in Kano that makes milk. Fantastic. I think that is really something, one of the things we're very proud to see that they have done. The second investment we made was, we looked at housing. All kinds of projects were thrown at us. We said no to all of them. We said to ourselves, the real challenge with housing at the moment is that mortgages are not an effective subsector. Okay. At the time, the Ministry of Finance was sponsoring the Nigerian Mortgage Refinancing Company. We put our hands up and said we'll co-sponsor it. We currently own 22% of that business. And the idea of that business is to bring interest rates down, so that when people go to get mortgages, the interest rates are much lower.
So how would that impact on the 17 million housing deficit?
Well, it starts with those who can actually take mortgages, right? At the end of the day, let's understand that. I don't know whether the number is 17, 20, or 10 million units. The reality is that we let us start somewhere, okay, and be able to make it easy for people. I lived in the UK and in New York, and my mortgage rates in those both places, my latest mortgage is less than 5%. You understand?
Yes, I know you have a whole lot of projects, and we don't have all the time,
yes,
to really talk on that.
Yes.
But there are 2 projects I'm sure Nigerians are quite interested in: the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, and of course the second Niger Bridge. And we've had the names of the Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Investment Authority
attached to both.
Attached to both.
Yes.
What is the position of your agency in that?
Sure. I will address that. Let me finish my point on housing. We are aiming to bring down the cost of mortgages, because that is a real crisis for people that will create jobs. Now, to Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, we have said publicly that we are on standby to invest. There are 3 things the Sovereign Wealth Fund can do when it comes to motorways. We can sponsor a project, we can co-develop, or we can invest. Lagos-Ibadan Expressway has developers who are working on it. We will just invest. Obviously, the matter is back in court, and what we've said is, when you resolve and you're ready for us to write a check, show us where, and we'll invest. But we'll review it, obviously, okay, and be sure that it works for us, and make sure that all the contractual documents are clean and clear. So we're not developers on that. We are on standby to invest once all the issues surrounding it is resolved. Second Niger Bridge is one where we are co-developing. And the reason was, we joined the original developer to now say we will co-develop it. And we are still in the early phases of that project, okay? Before you do a project, especially if you're bringing private sector to participate, they have to be comfortable with the cost. So we spent a long time reviewing the cost. We hired an independent team of engineering consultants to review the cost. Out of the UK, a company called WSP Group, who have, one of the biggest in the world, employ 32,000 people. They're one of the best engineering consulting firms. Go through the cost, go through the design, give us advice. We have to do environmental and social impact assessments. If you build a 11.9 kilometer bridge, 3 lanes going, 3 lanes coming, in an area that's marshy, that water levels rise and fall 12 meters in between dry and rainy season in some peak period, you have to understand what it means for the community. So we had to pay for that work. We had to do traffic study. We had to do all manner of other things, frankly, to prepare this project. So that is where we are. We have not signed a concession agreement. Okay. Once we sign that, we'll get to financing, and once we get through to financing, we'll start funding. But the federal government has done some early works, or is doing some early works. If you go there, you see most of the piling has been done. You see some of the superstructure coming up. But my expectation is that when we get through all of these early preparatory phases and get to financing close, by 2020 we should be able to be looking at when the bridge will be completed.
Okay, Managing Director, we're talking about a good job being done by your agency and looking at the investment profile and the profit you've made over time. And yet, a governor raised an issue against your agency.
Yes.
The governor of Edo State.
Yes.
Alleging missing fund of 700 million or something. What was your reaction to that?
No, I think most of that, it was a bit of, in my opinion, unfortunate, because the reality is that nobody even spoke to us before some of those things were. But we've resolved all those issues. I don't know where the information came from, but it is wrong and it's incorrect. There is no, it is actually, look, we can have a debate whether we made a right or wrong investment, but the processes we have in place, it is hard for money to miss. I cannot sign any expense by myself without having co-signatory. Even the EXCO cannot sign without it being approved by the board. And even after it's approved by the board, if it's above 20 million naira, we'll go back to the board. Do you understand? So that's the process we put in place to safeguard the assets of the NSIA. I don't know where all that came from, but I think at the end of the day, we've had a chance to present, and I think people understand that it's wrong information. Okay,
looking at your background, UBS, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan,
Diamond Bank,
Arthur Andersen, Nigeria,
yes,
is something that could inspire one. Yes. To what extent has this background helped you in queuing into international best practices in driving the operations of the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. But I think there are two things. And this is one part that people don't speak much about, and I think people should. And that is my background growing up in Nigeria, right? I've lived in every of the 6 geopolitical zones in the country. Lived. I'm not saying visited, lived. I was born in the southeast. I went to Government College Umuahia. I went to University of Port Harcourt in the south-south. I did my youth service in Bauchi in the northeast. I spent most of my summers in Kano. My auntie was chief pharmacist in the general hospital, and that's where I spent. My father lived there, owned property there. And I worked in Lagos, and I live in Abuja, right? So I've been everywhere in the country. So I know Nigeria.
How much are you tapping into global investment opportunities?
Absolutely. And at the same time, I've also had the privilege, and I thank God for that, of working in one of the best organizations in the world. And I think one of my first experience was actually when I was at Goldman in 1998, co-managing a sovereign wealth fund. They gave us money to manage for them. Okay. And it was a very amazing experience seeing how we helped them structure it and invest their money to bring that into the country. And JP Morgan was an amazing experience, because I went from what was called the buy side, which was investing side, to the advisory side. And so I've seen almost all of these funds, both as a co-manager of their funds or also an advisor to some of these funds. And I think all of that came together, thankfully, in a role. And this was why I accepted this role. I accepted this role because I think all these things, understanding of Nigeria, understanding of the international market, understanding of sovereign wealth funds, both as somebody who used to manage money for them and as somebody who used to advise a lot of them to hopefully bring about best practice here. And I think some of that is being recognized. You know, for a Nigerian agency to be ranked by the Sovereign Wealth Fund Institute as one of the most transparent in the world. And this is an independent agency called the Sovereign Wealth Fund Institute in the US.
Second, isn't it?
Yes, second category, yes. Okay. Joint second category. And I think that really makes us something to be very, very proud of, out of 84 sovereign wealth funds in the world. And,
all right. When we talk about or speak about the Sovereign Wealth Fund today, yes. Norway remains a reference point.
Yes.
Having accumulated a huge sum of $900 billion.
Yes.
And we also look in Africa, where Algeria has made impact of over 700 billion.
77 billion.
77 billion,
That's
so
correct.
to say.
That's correct.
And we look at the Nigerian picture, starting with $1 billion.
And controversy.
And controversy.
Yes.
What are your projections to ensure that we're able to steer the ship of the Sovereign Wealth Fund to that level? And what do we need to do?
Okay, so one thing you need to understand is that all sovereign wealth funds are not the same. They're not the same. They have different approaches, different structures. So if you look at Norway, for example, Norway puts their oil revenues into their sovereign wealth fund, everything. They don't use it to run the economy. The economy is still largely agriculture and fishing and small industries. So the sovereign wealth fund money, the oil money is put away. We use ours to run our budget, and we put the excess. And Norway is 5 million people, Nigeria is 170 million and growing. So You know, those are very different dynamics. And this is why Norway can, in a space of 25 years, go from zero to the biggest in the world. Kuwait uses part of theirs to run their budget, I believe. I'm not so sure, honestly, I don't know. They're my friends, so I don't really understand what goes on in there. But they are the oldest in the world. They've had the privilege of being the first.
So what are your projections, you know, to ensure that we take the Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Fund, say in the next 5 years, to where?
I don't know, to be honest. And it will be foolhardy for me to make those numbers. I have seen the medium-term expenditure framework, which says we can get to $4.5 billion. But that assumes that oil price stays at $53 and above. Do you know what oil price is going to be tomorrow? I don't know. So the way we're funded is we get anything in excess of a benchmark crude oil rate. Determining the benchmark crude oil rate or the actual price of oil is the biggest challenge. My one objective is to make sure that this place is built properly such that in the future, when we have this excess crude oil revenue coming, the fund will grow. But giving a 5-year projection will be very difficult.
Well, on that note, I'd like to say a special thank you to you because we have other issues to really discuss revolving around the Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Fund, but time is not our friend anymore. But I'm sure that the viewers are a lot more enlightened about the operations of the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority in managing the Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Fund with the Managing Director of NSIA as our guest. We'd like to thank you very specially. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Cliff. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Well, if you've been watching us, this is On the Spot, and our focus centered on the Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Fund and economic development of the nation, with the Managing Director of NSIA as our guest. I am Cliff Fayoze. Another time on this channel, we'll be back with another personality.